Okay, so I wanted to talk about whether people should leave the United States. And the reason I'm talking about it is because David Pakman released a video titled, and he's a very, popular political commentator for the liberals in the United States. I've been on his show once or twice. I'm preparing to leave the country. And in here, he talks about how he is planning finances and other stuff in order to leave the country if the need should arise. And he talks about, while nobody wants to flee the country right now, people need to be prepared for this outcome. And I wanted to talk about whether people should be preparing or whether people should leave or like consider that option. But first, let's listen to David Pakman talk about it so we have a foundation to build off of, and we can hear his perspective as to why he's making these preparations and whether the situation is severe enough that we need to be having this conversation with the current administration in the White House and their unconstitutional, illegal actions.
I need to talk to you about something that I know is going to trigger strong reactions from people in my audience. My only request is that you hear me out first, okay? The title of this segment is I'm Preparing to Leave the Country. And before you start typing angry comments about how I'm abandoning the United States or whatever, I want to be crystal clear. I am not actively planning to leave the United States at this moment. I'm not packing bags. I haven't bought a one-way ticket anywhere for my family. What I'm doing is I'm preparing to leave the country should the need arise. And as I've said to people when they call in, if we all leave, we lose the fight by default. But I will never tell someone, don't do what's best for your family. And so this is a form of prepping in a way. It's contingency planning. So let me kind of walk you through what I've been doing over the last few months as the ire of MAGA Trumpism has pushed closer and closer to people that are generally in my situation. Adversarial and antagonistic content creators, naturalized American citizens, another group of which I am a member, and let's have a rational conversation about preparedness. So number one, I have been exploring what would it take to move to Canada. Canada is a difficult place to move to. I'm not doing the whole I'm moving to Canada thing. It's also difficult to move to Canada, but I want to understand the process. What are the requirements? What is the timeline? What is the framework under which I would potentially qualify to move to Canada? It's a very complicated process, but I want to be informed. Secondly, I have been reviewing options in Argentina. Now, I already hold citizenship in Argentina. I'm from Argentina. Argentina has its fair share of problems there, right? It's not like you move to Argentina and all of a sudden your problems are gone. There are serious problems in Argentina, economic and also political. This is not about fleeing. It's, okay, if I want to go back there, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my family? Third, I have, at the advice of people in my audience, I have engaged with a law firm that would help me were I to have a problem re-entering the United States. I have found a law firm that essentially will be on standby when you re-enter the country, no matter your status. I'm a naturalized citizen. Should I have a problem, there would be someone that says, we will be available within X period of time, and should you have any issue getting back into the country, I want to make sure I understand my rights as a naturalized citizen when it comes to reentry. And fourth, this is not like passport bro stuff. I've consulted with a specialist about European countries where you can get permanent residency. This is not because I'm planning to become a European resident. It's because I want to understand what are the options and how does it work. Now, you might say, David, why are you spending time and money if you're not planning to leave? And the answer is the same reason people have emergency funds in a bank account, even if they're not planning to lose their job. It's the same reason people have insurance, even though they're not planning to have a car accident. It's the same reason people have fire extinguishers, even though they don't plan to set any house fires. Things are really uncertain right now. And we've seen how quickly things can change. We've seen journalists and political commentators in other countries face persecution. We've seen civil liberties eroded in places where people thought it wouldn't happen. So am I saying I will need any of this? No. Am I saying it's likely? No, not yet. No, I'm not saying it's likely. I'm saying I've determined circumstances are such that I want to know all of my options. Now, I want to be clear about what this is not. This is not a scheme to avoid paying taxes. I know there are people who say, oh, you can move to Cyprus and then this is not about that at all. I'm not looking for tax havens. In fact, it's very difficult to renounce American citizenship. It's not something I'm even thinking of. And if you don't, even if you move to another country, you still have tax responsibilities here in the United States. So this is not about
10 years.
shirking
10
any
years.
financial obligation. This is not about lifestyle preference. It's not the passport bro stuff, as I mentioned, or expat fire or any of these movements. This is purely, I want to understand my options in case circumstances change in ways that make staying here untenable for someone in my position. I still believe as of this moment, right, end of May 2025, I still believe as of this moment that the most likely scenario is I will never need any of this information. I'll continue living and working in the United States, paying my taxes, contributing to civic discourse, calling the United States home. But if the last 4 or 5 months have taught us anything, it's that sometimes unlikely scenarios become a reality. When they do, I want to be prepared. That's what this is. And the fact that I feel like I need to justify contingency planning so extensively probably tells you something about the current political climate. And the fact that this is controversial is probably why it makes sense. So have I lost my mind? Let me know. I think I'm being realistic about being responsible in preparation. I want to hear from you. What do you think? Is it reasonable contingency planning, what I'm doing, or am I overthinking things? Or am I suffering from paranoid delusions? Let me know. info@davidpakman.com.
Okay, so we let him get his whole thing out, okay, so nobody could misconstrue. So first thing I want to say that I do agree with him on, is that it's still not a particularly likely card that you need to pull at this point. For all intents and purposes that we know, midterms are still scheduled for 2026. Presidential election is still scheduled for 2028. The courts have knocked down many of his unconstitutional actions. Not all of them. Some of the things have been paused and then unpaused, and then it's going through the legal bureaucratic loops, and they're trying to take advantage of the slowness of the system to react. That's what we saw with the deportations of people to prisons that they were not approved to be deported to, even when the court told them, hey, don't deport them to this El Salvadorian prison, don't deport these women to a male El Salvadorian prison. We don't know if any of these people have criminal convictions. We're even finding out that the El Salvadorian government was asking if they had criminal convictions, and they wanted proof. They didn't feel like it was sufficient. They needed more to cover their ass. And when they were being told no, they just quickly did it, and then afterwards said, oh, well, oops, it happened too fast. But it was happening hours after the court told them not to. They're trying to be faster than the courts when they take unconstitutional actions. Now, when it comes to the press, I would say that right now, the main dangers is going to be intimidation. Is going to be legal intimidation, and it's going to be trying to use the tools of the system to shut you up or make it hard for you to operate. And we're not seeing only this with the practice of, commentators and news broadcasters, with how he's threatened the broadcasting licenses of news outlets that give coverage of him that he does not like, which could, cripple people's ability at these news organizations to broadcast to the people. I mean, the broadcasting license for those who broadcast on TV, it's your life breath. We saw that he was able to intimidate billions of dollars of free legal services out of threatening the operating licenses and the ability for these legal empires to operate within the United States. And while some lawyers fought, others, subdued themselves and gave the administration billions of dollars of free legal services for causes that he cares about. Not because they said we care about these causes too, but because they did not want further repercussion from the government. And this is the stuff at this moment, right now in our democracy, that I think is the most dangerous. And it is the submission in advance. It is when you submit yourself to oppressive activity of the state and advance. It is when you see the laws coming, you see the restrictions coming, you see the trudging on civil liberties, the trudging on the Constitution, the trudging on your rights coming. And instead of fighting, instead of even doing nothing, you submit yourself in advance. That's what we saw come from these lawyers when they gave him billions of dollars in free legal services. That's what we saw from the parent company of CBS and Paramount when they went to 60 Minutes and started to try to get more operational control of their coverage because Donald Trump didn't like their coverage, and he was threatening to sue them for the X, Y, and Z because he didn't release all of this footage, and he's threatened to sue a lot of these news organizations for bad coverage out of the hope that not that he could win these in a court of law. None of these he could win. He's not going to win the case on libel in any of these instances, or producing propaganda to help Harris win, or because it's bullshit. Anybody who looks at these cases that has any sound legal mind on them would say that it's bullshit. But it's an intimidation tactic. It's saying that we will go after you, and even if you win the case, you don't think the president of the United States can find other ways to make it difficult for you to operate? Maybe we restrict your access to important government officials, make it harder for you to do your work. Maybe restrict your access to the White House briefing room. Maybe remove your broadcasting rights. Maybe we launch investigations into all of your top reporters and top executives, like Donald Trump has launched investigations into former administration officials who do not buy into the big 2020 lie, which has become a loyalty test for top officials at the CIA and the FBI. And so when these things happen, you cannot submit in advance. Having any legal conglomerate give Donald Trump free legal services should be seen as those legal conglomerates becoming part of his authoritarian machine. Those submissions in advance are more dangerous than anything else. Because not only does it give Donald Trump more resources and encourage him, but they engage in behavior for others to follow. If some people see them submitting, maybe they don't submit, but maybe they keep their mouth shut. Because if that multi-billion-dollar legal conglomerate is submitting, what is little old you gonna do as a moralistic lawyer who believes in fighting for those who are underrepresented, or those who deserve fair representation? And maybe you're moralistic about our system, that we should make sure that nobody's above the law, even the president. But that's a big, expensive legal conglomerate. And so right now in this moment, I don't think we're at a point where we're talking about leaving the country. We got to be in the moment where we're slapping people awake, saying, if you submit to this guy, you're with this guy. The crimes that happen are going to be your crimes. That's what this moment is. I will say that the re-entering concerns are completely valid, especially if you're a naturalized citizen, or your legal your citizenship status is up in the air, and you're critical of this current administration. This administration has shown itself clear that if you're an immigrant and you give a foreign policy commentary, or if you give commentary that could either be as extreme as sympathetic to terrorists, or as extreme as critical of U.S. allies or this current administration, writing op-eds is a deportable offense now. And this might be, Dylan, that's an extreme statement to say that just writing op-eds is a deportable offense. Do you really think that? I don't only think that. I don't only believe that. I know that, because Marco Rubio was in a hearing where he was being asked on whether or not there were students that they were trying to deport because of the op-eds that they wrote, and he said yes. He said, yes, we're trying to deport them because of the op-eds, not because they have ties with terrorists, not because this person is trying to plan some horrible attack, but because this person wrote an op-ed on a college campus that they thought was too critical towards American power. My God, how many students would have been deported during the Vietnam War if writing op-eds or being critical of U.S. foreign policy could become a deportable offense? It's one thing to say, I'm going to deport this person who's openly endorsing terror attacks in the United States because this person obviously does not want to be a productive member of our country, or a productive member of our society. It's another thing to deport people for political opinions that might even be considered extreme or super critical of Western values. This is the college campus. College campuses are places where people are supposed to test themselves, where you're supposed to be exposed to dangerous values, okay? Woke values, not woke values, values that are pro-freedom, even some values that are anti-freedom. You need to test yourself. We do not want to coddle American high schoolers or American, but especially American college students, And this is not even something that's, hey, this is just going to have some effects when it comes to, intimidation of voices. This is going to really cripple a lot of colleges when it comes to the amount of students that are not going to want to come here anymore. But I'm getting a little off topic. Point is, they are going after people who are even naturalized citizens in some instances. And so I think that the re-entering concern is valid enough. Definitely, since there have been scientists, there have been tourists, there have been a bunch of people who have gotten into a lot of trouble at the border for very little. And when we talk about that one scientist who was trying to enter through Texas to go to a convention on stars and space and planets, he was denied entry, and the suspicion is that he was denied entry because of his critique of Donald Trump and the American government, which seems to be the current position. I want to see if I can find this Marco Rubio clip to give you an idea of just really how bad it is.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
You reclaiming my time. You revoked her student visa because she wrote an op-ed.
Would you revoke? We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the?
Yes, proudly. Yes, proudly to revoking her visa. He's like, oh, well, she says it was for the op-ed. They're stirring up trouble. What does stirring up trouble mean? Stirring up trouble on American campuses. Do you think if she was planting a bomb, they would call it stirring up trouble? Do you think it was, I don't know, gonna do some attack? It would be stirring up trouble? Do you think if it was, we're gonna burn down Harvard or something, or Columbia or whatever university, they would be burning? Do you think they would call it stirring up trouble? Or does this have to do with large-scale protests and disruptions, which have been part of American political culture since its inception? So going back to what this was originally about, whether or not you should leave the country, my belief is that you should only leave if resistance has completely failed. And that means that there's not going to be another election, or if there is, it's going to be a show, that any resistance, political, peaceful or non-peaceful, is no longer viable in maintaining a democratic republic, and that you are a target, and at this point, you're more of a danger to yourself than you are a help to the defense of the republic. And at that point, I think leaving is valid, especially if you're a high-profile figure that they're going to be paying attention to. If you're just some Joe Schmo who voted a certain way, I don't think they're not going to be going door to door, finding every person who voted for Biden and throwing them in a gulag. That's not going to happen, even under the Trump's dream scenario. But if you're a high-profile commentator who's critiquing the administration, this administration has made very clear that they'll go after broadcasting rights. This administration has made very clear that they'll investigate those who don't respect their 2020 election lies. This administration has been very clear that they want to throw libel charges and will engage in lawfare against those who critique the American administration. It has not been shown that they've been willing to lock up journalists who have been critical of the administration. But if they were willing to show that type of behavior, and they were willing to show that, there's not going to be any legal recourse anymore, we've gotten control of the judiciary, then at that point, I think it would make sense. Because if you're a voice and you're a broadcaster, you being able to broadcast from Spain while wanted by the American government would probably have more of an impact than you learning how to crochet in prison and use the crochet to defend yourself. Otherwise, I think you should defend the republic until your last breath, because it's the republic, and what else will we be able to pass down to our children? Trumpistan? Yeah, no. Toothbrushes are based in prison? What do you mean? Toothbrushes are based generally. I think everyone should brush their teeth, okay? That's my opinion.